Jujutsu Kaisen is getting more and more content, having just finished its second season, which I really enjoyed, and so I thought it was kind of interesting to look back at the first season and how well it compared. So today we're going to be ranking all the Jujutsu Kaisen arcs from the anime, starting with the Death Painting arc, aka the last arc of season 1. Now, this arc isn't really bad at all. In fact, it kind of gave me something I thought the show was starved of at that point, and that is getting to see more of our main trio's relationship. Before this, it didn't really feel like these guys were particularly good friends because they had barely spent any time with each other, and I think that this arc fixes that. Like, I think Nobara's chair analogy is really great, and the two of them feel way closer after this arc. The reason why I put this at last place is really just because I don't think it does enough to justify its existence. There isn't a lot of development for the characters, the antagonists are kind of weak, and it doesn't really have a lot to say. And because of that, I don't really have a lot to say about it either, especially because it's a really short arc. So with that being said, number 6 is the Fearsome Womb arc. Man, what type of name is that? This is basically from the start of the story up until episode 8. And this part is pretty neat. I really like the first 2 episodes as I think it sets up the story quite well. And Gojo versus Sukuna is just awesome. I do think the pacing moves a bit too quick for my liking. Not that that's anything new for Jujutsu Kaisen, but it felt particularly noticeable here, especially because of the structure of the story. Moving from point to point so often made me feel like it maybe would have been better if some of these parts were combined into one longer segment of the story. That way it would have felt more focused and less disjointed. I also don't think Nobara and Fujiguro got the best introduction to the story. They certainly don't make a bad first impression, but they do leave a bit to be desired. I do really like what happens towards the ending of this arc though, having Yuji like straight up die in a moment that is pretty telling of what type of person he is. It also gives us a pact between Yuji and Sukuna. Generally, I think this start really just sets up Yuji really well as the main character, and we also have Gojo versus Jogo, which is pretty awesome, showing us more of what Gojo can do, also giving us the main antagonistic force. It's a pretty good start to the story, and the arc that follows it also happens to be the one that's next on the list. Number 5, the Versus Mahito arc. Man, the name of some of these arcs are not really great, are they? This arc is obviously where we get introduced to the biggest piece of shit, but we also get introduced to the biggest goat of all time, Nanami. Honestly, Nanami is great in this whole arc, and probably the best part of it. His backstory is great, his ability is awesome, just a great character. I also like the character development Yuji gets. Mahito really feels like the perfect antagonist for Yuji. I think the biggest issue with this arc is Junpei, because Junpei almost feels like the main character of this arc, and yet I can't say what they did with this character was very satisfying to me. To me, it felt more like he existed solely for Yuji to receive character development and show just how evil Mahito is. And I think that part does work well, but I would have liked to see him have some more depth to him. Like, I can't say that him just flat out dying was a very satisfying ending for him, but oh well. Next up is the Gojo flashback, which honestly I was surprised that I didn't put this higher because it's genuinely great. It has 10 out of 10 animation and use of color, and also just like peak direction. Like, look at this shot after Gojo attacks Toji, panning from the building with the big hole in it to Toji's stomach that has an equally big hole. Shit like that is just so cool to me, man. Gojo is just the GOAT in this entire arc. He is such a fun character to follow, and I think getting more context about who he is a great way of making me care about him more. And Toji is just that guy, bro. He speaks for himself pretty much, and the 2 fights we get between him and Gojo are just insane. Like I said, I originally thought this was going to take second place, but when I thought about it, there was a couple of things that I weren't too crazy about. Kind of like Junpei, I don't really think Riko is that great of a character, which is a shame because her personality is fun, her character design is cool, but I just don't think they did anything interesting with her, and so her death feels very inconsequential. Like, I really didn't care too much when she died, and honestly, it didn't really feel like the characters care that much either, which is partially supposed to be the point, but also it's just like, what's the point if nobody cares? I think if she had been written a bit better, and maybe if she was a bit closer to Geto, it could have made Geto's turn to evil feel a bit more believable, which is what I would say the second thing I think could have been better was. Not that Geto's turn is like completely unbelievable, but I think it would have been better if we had seen some hints of him turning a bit earlier in the arc, especially because it's so short. Like, obviously we know he's going to turn evil because we've seen that in season 1 and the movie, but if you hadn't seen that, I feel like it might have seemed a bit random random. But honestly, who cares? This arc is just so good, so it doesn't even really matter. Next, we have the Kyoto Goodwill arc. I was a bit surprised by how high I ranked this, but looking back, it was just a really good arc. It introduced so many awesome characters and fleshed out so many of them. Maki versus Mai is an awesome fight and genuinely kinda sad. I can say the same with Panda and Mekamaru, which also shows off what kind of abilities this world has to offer. Panda's ability is just so sick. He can turn from a panda into a freaking gorilla, and also something else which has not been shown yet. That's something this arc does a lot. Just shows off like dope ass abilities like Todo or Inumaki or this old guy with a guitar. Overall, this just makes the whole world of Jujutsu Kaisen feel that much bigger. More characters for the good guys, more characters for the bad guys, new and creative abilities, and a lot of interesting politics within the Jujutsu Sorcerer world when it comes to the higher ups and how their views different from Gojo. It also has some of the best fights in the series with Todo and Yuji versus Hanami and some of the ones I mentioned before. Honestly, I don't really even have any issues with this arc. It could have been cool if it was longer because there was a couple of characters that maybe didn't get to shine as much as they should have. But again, that just comes back to my criticism with the show as a whole and how fast the pacing is. And to take the second place, we have Cursed Child arc, aka the movie. It's been a while since I saw this thing, but this was my best Jujutsu Kaisen experience up to that point. I enjoyed season 1 quite a bit, even though I thought it lacked in certain areas, but this movie was a significant step up in my opinion. Having a different main character to focus on in the same world was really dope, especially because of how different he is to Yuji. His struggle with Rika is pretty interesting, and to see him just unleashing all of his power at the end is really fulfilling. And getting to focus on these three for a whole movie was great, because there's such intriguing characters that I don't really feel like get enough shine in the show, especially like Inumaki. Also, this scene with Gojo and Geto just hits so different after seeing season 2. And obviously, I don't really need to say anything about the animation. This shit is movie quality. That one scene of Gojo just beating the shit out of this guy still lives rent-free in my head. And to take the #1 spot, I mean, I think you all knew this was coming, the Shibuya arc. In my opinion, the Shibuya arc is by far the best part of Jujutsu Kaisen so far. I just love how it manages to focus on so many characters at the same time without it feeling like half-assed or anything. There's so many character arcs that get concluded really nicely, and just overall, I think how they handled Yuji in this arc was like flawless almost. It also just completely shifts my perspective on the villains. Like, I actually like Jogo now after watching this, and somehow they managed to make me hate Mahito even more, like way more. Now, this doesn't mean that the arc is flawless by any means. There's a couple of things that I don't like about it, and if you want to know what those are, then you have to check out this video right here.